The Hebrew Scriptures had been translated into Greek. The New Testament was written in Greek. But soon, a growing number of churches were closer to the heart of the Roman Empire, where everyone would really speak Latin. If previous holy texts were translated, then surely another translation would be perfectly okay to do. There are many evidences of Latin translations of the Gospels in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. So the tradition of translating the good news into other human languages began very early. This is where the main hero of our story for this video enters the picture. Jerome was born in what is today Bosnia, but he moved to Rome as a student during his formative years. He was not a Christian and very skeptical of the religion, despite also feeling deep guilt in his lifestyle choices living into the culture of Rome as a student. He would later come to believe in Christianity and became interested in their sacred texts. As a student, Jerome had been trained in the classics and appeared to have a gift with languages. Jerome moved to the East and continued his pursuit of mastering the Greek language. Later, after years of study in the East, Jerome found himself back in Rome and being asked by the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, to update and standardize the early Latin translations of the Gospels using the Greek manuscripts. Jerome completed the new Latin translation of the Gospels and some of the other New Testament texts. These texts went on to become the accepted translation of the New Testament in the Western Church for really over a millennia. Under his own compulsion, Jerome also sought to master Hebrew, and he moved to Jerusalem to do so. He had learned some Hebrew from the Jewish Christians that he was in contact with in Antioch, but sought to master it with the resources available in the biblical traditions of Jerusalem. A very rich financier funded Jerome living in a monastery in Bethlehem. You could even go visit that monastery today. And then it was there that he translated the entire Old Testament using the Hebrew tradition of the texts and not the Septuagint. The early church in both the East and the West had held to the Septuagint version of the Hebrew Scriptures. This is part of the reason the later Jewish Masoretes would distance themselves further from the Septuagint tradition and toward the Palestinian Hebrew tradition to differentiate themselves from the growing Christian church. This is also why both the Roman and the Greek church today use those texts that we saw in the last video were included in the Septuagint in their Old Testaments. Earlier Latin versions of the Septuagint already existed before Jerome's translation from the Hebrew. Jerome had even helped to translate some of the Septuagint into Latin himself. It took many years for the Catholic Church to put Jerome's translation from the Hebrew to use as their main text for the Old Testament. Though parts of Jerome's translations were used in various sectors of the church, it wasn't really until the 16th century and the Council of Trent that it was officially made the Latin text of the Roman Church. The ironic part of the story of the Latin text of the Bible is that though it is itself a translation, it soon became more about maintaining tradition than about communicating the biblical text to the people. As Latin faded as a day-to-day language among various elements of the old Roman Empire, the language became antiquated, and it had been removed from them almost as much as the Hebrew and Greek behind it. These deep traditional roots not only kept new translations from coming into existence, but they also led to the neglect of the original languages. Latin had become the replacement sacred language for the Roman Church, while in the East they maintained the Greek tradition, but both sides of the church equally neglected the Hebrew.